I was 15 when my parents finally decided I was no longer their daughter. With no sympathy and compassion, they pushed me out like I never existed in their lives. No goodbye. No second chances. Just a closed door and a life I was forced to survive alone. I cried and slept on the streets until my uncle surprisingly found me. What they never knew was that the uncle they erased from the family quietly took me in and raised me while they forgot I existed. 20 years later, my mother walked into his will reading, smiling, expecting millions of dollars. She didn't recognize the woman sitting across from her. She never recognized how grown I had become. My parents couldn't recognize me in any way, and by the time the lawyer arrived, the room went silent. And that's when they realized the past had finally caught up with them. But it was too late. It happened on a Thursday evening, the kind that feels ordinary until it splits your life in half. Dinner had already gone cold on the table. My school report lay between my mother and father like evidence in a courtroom. The red ink bled through the paper, harsh and unforgiving. My hands were shaking, but I kept them folded in my lap. I already knew. Failure was not something my family tolerated. It wasn't a phase or a lesson, it was a stain. And stains, in my parents' world, were cut away before they spread. My mother didn't raise her voice. That was the cruelest part. "We've talked about this, Lillian," she said calmly. Too calmly. "You were given every advantage. Tutors. Private school. Structure." My father nodded beside her, his lips pressed into a thin, practiced line. He hadn't looked at me once since I walked into the room. "You chose not to use it," Mom continued. "So we're done choosing for you." I tried to explain. About the anxiety. About the way my chest tightened during exams. How the words blurred no matter how hard I studied. I told them I was trying. That I wasn't lazy. That I just needed time. My father finally looked at me then. And I will never forget what I saw in his eyes. Not anger. Not disappointment. Relief. As if he'd been waiting for permission to let go. "Pack your things," he said. "You're no longer our responsibility." I laughed at first. A short, broken sound that didn't feel like it came from me. "You're joking," I said. You're grounding me or something, right?" My mother stood up. "No," she said. "We're protecting this family. Protecting it from me." She turned toward the hallway, already done with the conversation. My father stood as well, adjusting his watch like he had somewhere more important to be. I followed them, my heart slamming against my ribs. "You can't just throw me out," I said. "I'm your daughter." My mother paused at the door and looked at me with eyes so cold I physically recoiled. "You were," she said. "Now you're a liability." I packed in silence. No one helped. No one watched. My room, pink walls, childhood trophies, framed family photos, suddenly felt like a hotel I'd overstayed in. I took clothes. A notebook. My old phone with a cracked screen. That was it. When I dragged my backpack to the front door, my parents were already there. My mother held it open. My father stared straight ahead. It was raining. Hard. The kind of rain that doesn't feel cleansing, only punishing. I stepped onto the porch and turned back one last time. "Please," I said. I didn't even recognize my own voice. "I'll do better." My father finally met my eyes. "I hope so," he said. "But not here." The door closed behind me with a soft click. Not a slam. Which somehow hurt worse. I stood there for a moment, soaked through, staring at my reflection in the glass. A thin, scared girl with wild hair and no place to go. Then I walked. I didn't know where I was going. Only that I couldn't stand still. The neighborhood lights blurred through the rain. Cars passed without slowing. My phone battery dropped to 12%, then 8%. By the time I collapsed on a bench at a bus stop, I was shaking uncontrollably. I don't know how long I sat there, hugging my knees, wondering if this was how people disappeared. That's when a black sedan slowed beside me. The window rolled down. "Lillian," a man said cautiously. I looked up and froze. It was Uncle Victor. My parents never spoke about Victor. Not in anger. Not in grief. Just silence. I remembered him from years ago. Tall, sharp-eyed, always smiling like he saw the world differently. The last time I'd seen him, I was 9. After that, he vanished from family gatherings as if he'd never existed. "What are you doing out here?" he asked, already stepping out of the car. I tried to speak, but my throat closed. Tears spilled before words could. Victor didn't ask questions. He shrugged out of his coat and wrapped it around my shoulders. "Get in," he said gently. The car was warm. Smelled faintly of leather and coffee. I sat there dripping onto the seat, ashamed of everything I was. As we drove, I told him everything. The exam. The fight. The door closing behind me. Victor listened without interrupting. His jaw tightened, but his voice stayed calm. "They did this tonight?" he asked. I nodded. He exhaled slowly. "Then you're staying with me," he said. "I don't think they'd want." "They don't get a vote," he cut in. "And they don't need to know." That last sentence changed my life. Victor lived in a large, quiet house on the edge of the city. Nothing flashy. Just solid. Intentional. He gave me a guest room. Dry clothes. Hot soup. No lectures. No conditions. That first night, as I lay in a clean bed listening to rain hit the windows, I waited for the catch. It never came. Weeks passed. Then months. Victor enrolled me in a different school. Public. Smaller. Kinder. When I struggled, he hired a therapist instead of a tutor. "You're not broken," he told me once, handing me tea after a panic attack. "You're just human." No one had ever said that to me before. We never spoke about my parents. And I learned not to ask about his past. Years rolled by. I grew stronger. Quieter. More observant. Victor taught me things my parents never did. How money actually worked, how people hid their intentions, how silence could be power. I watched him build and manage businesses I barely understood at first. He never pushed me into his world, but he never kept me out of it either. "Learn," he said. "Knowledge is freedom." By 18, I was helping with paperwork. By 22, I understood contracts better than most professionals. I paid my own way through school, with Victor's guidance, not his wallet. That mattered to him. My parents never reached out. Not once. No birthday cards. No calls. Nothing. I'd see their names occasionally in town gossip. My father's promotion, my mother's charity events. They were doing just fine without me. I told myself I didn't care. That was a lie. By the time I was 35, I had a life my 15-year-old self could never have imagined. I was confident, composed, self-sufficient, and still invisible to them. Victor aged faster than I expected. Stress, old wounds, long hours. When he got sick, I was the one who took him to appointments, who managed his affairs, who sat beside him in hospital rooms at 3 a.m. "You've been my greatest investment," he joked once, squeezing my hand. I laughed, but my throat burned, because I knew something my parents didn't. Victor had no children, and I was family in every way that mattered. The call came on a quiet Tuesday morning. Victor had passed peacefully in his sleep. I didn't scream. I didn't collapse. I just sat on the edge of my bed, numb, holding a phone that suddenly felt far too heavy. A week later, invitations went out for the will reading. That's when my parents resurfaced. I heard through mutual contacts that my mother was expecting closure. That my father was curious. They arrived at the lawyer's office dressed in black, wearing grief like a performance. My mother smiled when she saw me. A polite, calculating smile. "Lillian," she said, "I didn't expect you here." I smiled back. I did. She laughed lightly, already picturing numbers. They had no idea. And I let them sit in that ignorance. Because the real reckoning hadn't begun yet. The lawyer's office smelled like polished wood and old paper, the kind of place where decisions lingered long after voices stopped echoing. I arrived early. Not because I was nervous. Because I wanted to watch them walk in. The receptionist led me into a private waiting room, but I declined. I chose a chair against the far wall of the main conference room, close enough to observe without being observed. Victor had taught me that power often lived in stillness. The door opened 20 minutes later. My parents entered as if they owned the space. My mother wore a tailored black dress, pearls at her neck, subtle, expensive, deliberate. Her face was set in practiced grief, lips pressed gently together, eyes soft but alert. My father followed half a step behind, his shoulders stiff, his suit impeccable. He looked older than I remembered. Smaller, somehow. They didn't see me at first. They spoke in hushed voices, already scanning the room. Victor never liked crowds, my mother murmured. But he was always dramatic. My father nodded. He wouldn't have called everyone here for nothing. I almost smiled. They took seats near the head of the table. That's when my mother noticed me. Her eyes flickered, just once, before settling into polite surprise. "Oh," she said lightly. "Lillian." I stood. Mother. Father. The words felt foreign on my tongue. My father cleared his throat. "We didn't know you were involved." Involved. I echoed gently. I was family. My mother smiled thinly. "Of course. We just assumed." "You assumed I disappeared," I said. Calm. Level. "The way you wanted." Silence. Then she laughed. Dismissive. "Let's not do this here." "Oh, but we would." Others began to arrive. Victor's business associates, a distant cousin, 2 board members. People who actually knew him. Who'd sat at his table. Who'd been shaped by his mind. My parents straightened, slipping seamlessly into social mode. My mother accepted condolences with grace. My father shook hands solemnly, nodding at stories he barely recognized. They were excellent actors. I stayed quiet. Victor once told me, when people underestimate you, let them. The lawyer arrived precisely at 10. Mr. Hargreave. Grey hair. Sharp eyes. No patience for theatrics. "Please," he said, gesturing. "Take your seats. We'll begin." The room settled. Papers rustled. My mother folded her hands, already composed for the moment she'd clearly rehearsed in her head. "This is the last will and testament of Victor Hale," Mr. Hargreave began. My mother exhaled softly, as if bracing herself for emotion. The first sections were predictable. Charitable donations. Trusts for employees. Endowments for education programs. My mother nodded approvingly. "He always had a soft spot for causes," she whispered to my father. Then came the businesses. Percentages. Shares. Management transitions. My father leaned forward slightly. "And now," the lawyer continued, "we come to personal bequests." My mother's fingers tightened. The lawyer adjusted his glasses. "To my brother and sister-in-law," he read, "I leave my forgiveness." The room went still. My mother blinked. "Forgiveness." Mr. Hargreave continued reading. "For choosing pride over compassion. For abandoning blood when it became inconvenient. I hope time has taught you what money never could." My mother's face flushed. "This is highly inappropriate," she snapped. The lawyer didn't look up. "There are no financial assets designated to Mr. and Mrs. Hale." My father stiffened. "That can't be right." "Oh," my mother said tightly. Victor was emotional. "He didn't mean." "He meant every word," I said softly. She turned toward me, eyes sharp. "You have no place speaking here." I met her gaze. I have every place. The lawyer paused, letting the weight settle. And now, he said, to my heir. My mother's breath caught. My father's eyes darted around the room. This is the part, my mother whispered, gripping her purse. This is where he surprises everyone. The lawyer looked directly at me. I leave the entirety of my estate, businesses, properties, investments, and liquid assets, to my daughter. The word echoed. Daughter. My mother laughed. A sharp, disbelieving sound. Victor had no children, she said. The lawyer didn't break eye contact with me. He did, he said. In every way that mattered. My father slowly turned toward me. Lillian, he said. What is this? I stood. My inheritance, I said. And my truth. This is absurd, my mother said, rising from her seat. You can't just, she's not, this is manipulation. Mr. Hargreaves slid a document across the table. Adoption papers, he said. Filed 20 years ago. Legally sealed at Mr. Hale's request. My mother staggered back into her chair. My father's face drained of color. He adopted you, he whispered. Yes, I said. After you threw me away. My mother's voice trembled with fury. You had no right. You forfeited that, I replied calmly. The night you closed the door. Mr. Hargreave wasn't finished. There is an addendum, he said. One that must be read aloud. My mother shook her head. No. Enough. The lawyer ignored her. In the event that my brother and sister-in-law attend this reading, he read, I wish the following to be disclosed. He paused. Over the past 20 years, I quietly acquired and dissolved multiple debts incurred by them. Mortgages, loans, legal settlements, under a shell trust. My father's eyes widened. What debts? He demanded. The lawyer slid forward another file. The trust is now dissolved, he said. And responsibility returns to its original holders. My mother screamed. That's impossible. No, I said softly. It's accountability. My father turned to me. And for the first time in my life, he looked afraid. You knew, he said. All this time, you knew. Yes, I said. And I stayed silent. He swallowed. Why? I held his gaze. Because you taught me that silence is power. He looked away. The lawyer cleared his throat. There is one final instruction, he said. The room leaned in. My daughter Lillian is not obligated to assist her biological parents in any financial or legal matter henceforth. He closed the folder. This concludes the reading. My mother collapsed into sobs. My father didn't move. I walked past them without hesitation. At the door I paused. You asked me to do better, I said quietly. I did. Then I left. Outside, the air felt lighter. Not because I'd won, but because I was finally free. Victor had given me everything. Not money, but truth. Moral lesson. Sometimes the people who abandon you believe time will erase their choices. But time doesn't forget. It records. Family isn't defined by blood, but by who shows up when you have nothing to offer. And while silence may delay justice, it never cancels it. In the end, what we give to others is exactly what we inherit.